Hi guys, in this video I'm going to go through the analysis of the poem The Prelude. Now the first thing that you need to know is the context. So if we just go through context very quickly, the first thing that you need to know is that Wordsworth, who's the writer, was a romantic poet. So that's the first piece of context that you need to know. And the other one that I think is really important is that Wordsworth believed that nature was both beautiful and powerful. And so he explored the connection between nature and human emotion. So those are the main contextual points that I think are the most important for you to know before you start analysing the text. And then the second thing that you should know and that you should know from this poem is that it is written in a form of a blank verse. So it sounds serious and important. So if we just write that. So there is the form of this poem. And I also think the attitudes in the poem are quite important. And the three attitudes here shown are confidence, reflection, and fear. So those are the main three attitudes that are shown in this poem. Now we also need to know have a small list of other poems we can compare this to. And those poems are Storm on the Island, Exposure, Tissue, and Remains. So I'm just going to write that as well. So these are the four poems that I think would most likely link to this poem. Just to recap, we've looked at context, form, attitudes, and links for this poem. So make sure you understand all of this before you actually start to annotate. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at a quick summary of this poem just before we annotate. And that summary is that the narrator in this poem finds a boat, he unties it and he takes it onto the lake. He seems quite confident and content as he describes a beautiful scene, but then a mountain appears and it scares the narrator, so he turns around and goes home. So that's just a quick summary of what happens. If you want to know the summary and the context in more detail, there are videos separately on this poem, The Prelude, that you can watch on this channel. So let's begin the analysis. So the first quote that I'm going to zoom in on is this one. Straight, I unloosened her chain and stepping in, pushed. Now, the first part of that sentence, so straight, I unloosened her chain, is the main part, and then stepping and pushed comes into the explanation. So just extra words just to back up your explanation of that first part. Now we can see this is a semantic field of confidence and where there's no fear and there's only courage. So what's happened here is that the narrator has found a boat on the side of like a river, and what he's done is he's just unloosened it and he's got onto the boat and he's begun to like go on the river and have a little adventure of his own. And he's done that without any fear and he's very confident with what he's doing. So straight, stepping, pushed. Examples, they're all verbs, so they're doing words. And so there's no hesitation there. That's the first part of this whole poem. And the second quote that I'm going to zoom in on is this one. Troubled pleasure. Now this is an oxymoron. And it may or may not, and you can use it as an explanation, it's an emphasis of his guilt after he's stolen the boat. Because it's not his, he's just found it. So troubled pleasure is an oxymoron and it emphasizes his guilt after stealing the boat. Now remember that the quotes that I go through are not the only ones that you can pick and annotate and analyze in your essays. These are just the main ones that I think would be the best to pick out of this poem. Now the next thing that I'm going to focus on, the next quote, is elfin penance. And if I just highlight that, the first thing that we can identify here is that it's a metaphor. And it's like the boat is taking him on an adventure. So it's like a dream. And if you don't know what these two words mean, if we just define them first. So an elfin is a fairy and a pinnace is a small boat. Now this is a metaphor. So if we think about it, and I've said that it's like a dream, it's like a surreal dream because fairies aren't real. So he feels that this is not a real dream. It's not a real dream, but it feels like a dream, and it's as if this boat is taking him on an adventure. Now the next quote that I'm going to pick can actually be seen as a volta, so a turning point in this poem. And that quote is actually right here. So it says, "The horizon's bound." Now the reason that it's a turning point is that because this is the first time that the mountain is introduced. So we can see that from where it says huge peak, black and huge. So that is how we know that the mountain is here now, it's being introduced. So it's a turning point, it's the volta of this, it can be seen as the turning point of this poem. However, if we zoom in on the word bound, so that is a noun, it could undeniably highlight that the happiness is limited and it may foreshadow a later threat of nature. Because a bound is like a boundary, so it just stops, it's just there, it's like you can't cross over it. So this is an example of how Wordsworth might be expressing his belief that nature was both beautiful and powerful. Because we know up till this point, the narrator has been complimenting the nature that's around him, but all of a sudden, the atmosphere has changed. So there's a turning point here because the mountain has arrived. So he can now see the mountain, and it's emphasizing the beauty of nature and the power of nature, so it can intimidate can intimidate the man. Now the next quote that we're going to pick is right here. So it says, "I struck and struck again." Now we notice there's repetition here, and it could highlight the panic and the fear of the man, and it emphasizes the power of nature. The nature is beautiful and it's powerful. So you can also link this to Wordsworth being a romantic poet. So he believes that power of nature is more powerful than the power of man. Remember that the power of nature is a very key contextual point that you need to link into your the ends of your essays to get the marks, because very key, it's very important because it helps your understanding of the poem as well. So we know the power of nature is overcoming the confidence that the man had at the beginning when he took the boat, and now his confidence has changed and become panic and fear. Now the next thing that I'm gonna look into and highlight is here. So the next quote is here, and that is, "Their hunger darkness, call it solitude or blank desertion." Now there's a semantic field here of depression, and it's kind of like punishment. So here we've written that there's a semantic field of depression, and it's because of the punishment for stealing the boat. So just to explain that a little bit further, we need to look at the words darkness, solitude, and desertion. And so he stole the boat at the beginning, he felt the guilt, and that guilt has turned into depression. So that is what these two lines kind of highlight. Now the last quote that I just want to focus on is the last one, "Trouble to my dreams." And this highlights the traumatic experience that the man had, the narrator, and how nature has a lasting impact. And if we want to zoom into the language feature or the structure of the poem, we can look at enjambment, because it carries on from here onto this next line. So it goes from "move slowly through my mind by day and were trouble to my dreams." Now we can say that the enjambment is highlighting how he's haunted day by day, and it just carries on, and it's like a cycle. So the mountain, nature has so much power that it is haunting him for the rest of his life. So that's just the last thing that I would add, and again, it's highlighting the beauty of nature and the power of nature. because at the beginning nature is beautiful and all of a sudden he's intimidated by it. So the narrator is intimidated by the mountain, so it's highlighting the power of nature. So that was the Prelude written by William Wordsworth. That was the whole full analysis of the poem. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Thank you very much for watching.